Welcome back to The Price of Business. I'm your host, Kevin Price, talking to you about you and your business. Lee Kaplan with Spicer Kaplan of Veselka. That's skv.com. He's a regular contributor on The Price of Business, bringing some very timely topics on things such as business and as it relates to the law and how the law relates to our current headlines. And we always have a lot of fun chatting with him. And before we get into our topics today, and I'm really grateful we get to keep them for 2 segments, Lee, tell us a little bit about your practice.
Our firm does litigation, trials, arbitrations, and appeals, commercial lawsuits on the civil side, plus white-collar criminal matters. So that can range, all of that can range from the theft of trade secrets or patent cases to securities lawsuits to garden variety fraud. Well, we call it garden variety, although many frauds are extremely sophisticated and require a lot of forensic work. Once in a while, we will defend a medical malpractice case for the largest medical institution in Houston. Just different kinds of lawsuits, whatever comes down the pike. We are basically trial lawyers. We're not transactional lawyers.
And that website is skv.com. Interesting story, a chilling one, in fact, about the raid of the Panama Papers. And first of all, give us a little bit of background on this.
Well, the starting point is that many people live in countries where they don't like the tax regimes. And the wealthiest people in these countries, and that includes some people in the United States, look for overseas places to park money and set up shell corporations and perhaps take advantage of their own country's tax law or some other. So there is a law firm called Mossack Fonseca in Panama, which apparently over the years has set up over over 200,000 offshore companies. And apparently hackers got a hold of this, hacked into their system, leaked over 10 million documents, and it has attorney-client information. And then that caused the government of that country to raid the law firm. But it's pretty embarrassing because you have a number of very highly placed individuals in the governments of other countries like Argentina, Saudi Arabia, the Ukraine, who apparently are keeping money overseas. Well, that's guaranteed to aggravate and anger the citizens of those countries because they think there are 2 sets of rules, one for the ordinary person and one for the people who have the money to hide money overseas.
Yes, and for all those who doubted that was the case, it is a reality.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely. There's no question about that. So, and I think it's interesting I think it's an interesting statement and maybe a warning shot over the bows of people who are thinking about trying to hide money in various countries to really kind of look at the treatment of rule of law because, I don't think something like this could happen in the United States. Your thoughts? Well,
when you say something like this happening in the United States, I'd be stunned if there weren't thousands of Americans who are clients of Mossack Fonseca and have set up offshore shell companies to evade U.S. taxes.
No, what I mean is the reverse.
Perhaps evade them legally. If you're asking whether there's a law firm in the United States that systematically does this for people, I have to believe there are.
Yes, no. What I'm saying is because of our laws, it's not likely that a law firm would be raided for this kind of sweeping form of information like they can do in Panama, is what I meant.
Well, maybe not. I've never been the subject of a raid, and I'm not looking forward to that ever happening to me, but I'll bet you that there are law firms that get raided in the United States on suspicion of aiding and abetting or conspiring in illegal activity relating to tax evasion, and that the people who conduct those raids are not particularly, shall we say, gentle in the way they turn an office upside down. After all, if you just have your firm's computers seized and you're a law firm or any other business, you're basically done for, and that can happen. And I I don't think lawyers are immune from that.
Yeah, that's why I keep everything on the cloud, especially if you're if you're an attorney. Keep everything on the cloud. So, have names been mentioned yet? You mentioned countries. Have specific names been brought up?
My recollection is that, yes, there have been a number of people mentioned. For example, some of the officers of FIFA, that the World Soccer Federation that's been in the news so much and has been pretty controversial. Some of the actual leaders of these countries, Argentina, Saudi Arabia, Ukraine, and so, there are lots of people that have mentioned. It seems to me that perhaps the president of Iceland was mentioned, and close relatives of many of these people, so that on occasion perhaps these close relatives have gotten wealthy from activities in the country and then set up offshore corporations to shelter that money in some fashion.
Yeah, that's interesting.
It's not necessarily illegal to set up offshore corporations. It might or might not be illegal to avoid paying taxes in your home country. In the United States, American citizens, even those living abroad and making money overseas, have to pay U.S. taxes on that income.
Mm-hmm.
So I would expect that Americans are probably subject to a pretty strict regime on that sort of thing. But whether there are people that have so far evaded it and information that has now been hacked about them, I would be willing to bet there is.
Mm-hmm. Yep, I think it's an interesting dilemma, to say the least. Talking again to my friend Lee Kaplan, Spicer Kaplan of Veselka. What do you think the longer-term implications are going to be?
Well, people are not going to stop trying to evade the taxes. They're not going to stop trying to shelter money. And it's just like any other human endeavor, whether it's a private endeavor or a government-based endeavor, there are people who are going to fall prey to temptation. I would expect that other countries have a bigger problem than the United States, but in the long term, I would guess that there will be countries that will want to be havens like that because they will want the fees and they'll want the money in their reserves that comes from having foreigners give them money that they want to keep shielded from their home country. So this will keep happening.
Yeah,
and
I think you're
just
right.
Like any other crime, you just keep going after it and try to keep it to a dull roar.
There was a great article I read years ago. I think it was in Forbes magazine by Thomas Sowell, the great economist, and he pointed out, the reality is that the government tries to treat people like they're trees. And trees will sit there and let you come at it with an axe, and they can't put, much effort to resist that. Humans aren't like that. When it comes to things like taxes, we'll either take flight, or we'll fight, one of the two. It's hard to fight government, so they take flight instead, and that's exactly what we've seen with these kind of tax shelters. And you're right, we're only going to see more of them as the environment makes it more advantageous to do that.
Well, the other thing people may not realize while we're sitting here scoffing at others, in some ways the United States is a tax haven from other countries.
Yeah.
We apparently did not implement what's called the Common Reporting Standard, whereby we would share information about what happens in our country with other countries. And so there are many foreign investors who come to the United States and have assets here, and maybe they're income producing, maybe they're capital gains types assets, but they don't report them to their home countries, and the United States doesn't share that information. So in some ways, while we're not as secretive as, say, Switzerland, we are much more secretive than many other countries. And so people in unstable areas or areas with somewhat repressive regimes where you might be subjected to, say, a vindictive tax investigation or a vindictive prosecution will park money in the United States. And we have pretty lenient regulations for setting up a shell company.
Yep. Very good. Thanks so much for being with us. Again, Spicer, Kaplan, and Veselka, Lee Kaplan, and SSKV.com. Thank you, sir.
You're welcome.
Do want to remind a listener that, by the way, we're going to continue our conversation with him after the break. Do want to remind a listener, great interviews by Lee Kaplan or with Lee Kaplan can be found over our sister website, usdailyreview.com. Stay tuned for more right after this.